My anger toward Paul grew into a hatred of all men. I began to reject the gender binary itself. By 2016, I identified as trans. In college, I was sexually assaulted by a classmate named Paul. Ashamed, I only told a few friends. I didn't even call the police. My friends gossiped, word spread. One night, a classmate approached me and said she'd heard what happened. Paul had done the same to her. She'd even heard about other women. I reached out to them for confirmation. There were 6 of us, each silenced by her own brand of shame, determined to put a stop to Paul's violence and protect prospective victims. We reported him to the school and the police. He never even got a slap on the wrist. This was before the Me Too movement, back when we, the survivors of rape, were assumed to be the criminals, hysterical women crying wolf. Amidst the tumult, I was nominated for an arts fellowship at Yale University, which I won. This was huge. Art was my passion. When I had first learned in school about artworks that changed history, I became determined to make one too, confident that with hard work, I too could expand the scope of art. As a fellowship recipient, I was granted studio space in Connecticut over summer break. I was thrilled to get out of town and away from the drama in New York. Out in Connecticut, I could make anything I wanted, unencumbered by my professor's assignments. For no particular reason, I found an unused room in a house on the property and filmed myself dancing in it. The product was relatively boring. To shake things up, I asked a friend to film me preparing for the video, recording it, and resetting everything once I was done. One moment in the resulting footage caught my eye when I was struggling to carry the bed out of the room. I wanted to explore it further. I asked her to film me again, but this time I would bring it all the way out of the house. I realized that the mattress might represent the weight of what I'd endured, evoking how it feels to bring something intimate out of the bedroom and into the light. The one remaining dissonance was that my assault had happened on a college campus, while the video depicted me in the middle of nowhere. I realized that to perfect this piece, I would have to carry the mattress, like the one on which I'd been assaulted, when I got back to Columbia. While honing the final form of what would become Mattress Performance, Carry That Weight, I took inspiration from the year-long endurance works of my favorite performance artist, To Ching Hsieh. For example, in one, he locked himself in a cage for a year. I loved the meditative quality of embarking on a journey that took such internal resolve. I was curious to see how I myself might change over the course of my final year of college if I committed to carrying the mattress everywhere I went, gaining physical and emotional strength as I overcame my pain. I did not expect my performance to cause a stir beyond the Columbia community. However, by the end of the first day, camera crews were trailing me everywhere. Overnight, I became the figurehead of the incipient movement to end sexual assault on college campuses worldwide. I was featured on the covers of the New York Times and New York Magazine. I received a standing ovation led by Gloria Steinem. I was a guest at President Obama's State of the Union speech. I was trolled. I got death threats. I was reviled by individuals on both ends of the political spectrum. One article, written by a journalist named Kathy Young, was particularly destructive. Kathy worked with Paul to splice our Facebook messages and make it look like I'd asked him to, quote, fuck me in the ass. In reality, I'd said something like, I have to wake up early in the morning, fuck me in the ass, in the way that someone might say, shoot me in the head without actually wanting to be murdered. The fact that a full-grown adult felt compelled to manipulate the truth and cause a stupid 21-year-old like myself so much suffering seemed like proof that the political right in my country was both petty and malicious. Meanwhile, the left showered me with praise and awards, which increasingly aligned me and obliged me to champion my party's social causes. My frustration with Columbia and the police became a rejection of all institutions. My anger toward Paul grew into a hatred of all men. I began to reject the gender binary itself. By 2016, I identified as trans. While I fully support individuals who need other pronouns to affirm their gender identity, I personally no longer need them myself. By the time the Me Too movement gained widespread popularity in 2017, I was under so much media-fueled scrutiny that I hardly recognized myself. Art, the place where I had once felt free to experiment, play, and express my ambition, had become a straitjacket. I was having repeated panic attacks. Thank God I met Dylan Marin, the host of a podcast that I'd never heard of called Conversations with People Who Hate Me. Dylan wanted me to be a guest on his show. His plan was to contact one of my online detractors and moderate a conversation between us. We picked a rather benign one named Benjamin, who sent me a Facebook message calling me a liar. Most episodes of Conversations with People Who Hate Me result in the participants gaining newfound appreciation for one another. My conversation with Benjamin ended differently. He basically grilled me, and I felt backed into a corner. My final words were, "So, yeah, I'm definitely going away from this conversation feeling a little like I'll never have the kind of resolution I wanted. And you know, it's always sad because it's like I never wanted to be raped in the first place. And I never wanted to be here at all. So, yeah, I'm coming away from this conversation a little heartbroken, and I guess I hope that this conversation ends up meaning something to someone someday." When the episode went live, it caused such an uproar that Benjamin started receiving hatred from strangers too. This instigated a follow-up episode in which Dylan moderated a conversation between Benjamin and a woman named Kay, who'd commented on Facebook, "Ben, if you're reading this, I hope you're eaten alive by wild dogs." This time around, Benjamin sounded like a new person. In the months since we had talked, he had listened to our episode 5 times. He was ready to approach the subject of sexual assault with an open mind. Benjamin's transformation reminded me that change doesn't happen overnight, and there's no use in feeling upset when people don't change their minds as quickly as we'd like. That summer, I was single, and I matched with a guy who'd super liked me on Tinder. We bantered and decided to meet up. Before our date, I stalked him on Twitter and saw that he was conservative. A past version of me would have ended it there. However, my experience with Dylan's podcast made me wonder whether we might, at the very least, have an interesting conversation. I texted him that it might be, quote, interesting, progressive, powerful for two people who might be the antithesis of each other to go on a Tinder date. Later, the wonderful journalist Sylvie McNamara wrote a viral article for New York Times about this part of my story. She spoke with my date and asked him if he had a preferred pseudonym. He picked Chad, which was, as she put it, a reference to the incel term used for men who, due to serendipitous genetics, are attractive enough to have oodles of sex. And Chad is a Chad. Ahead of our date, Chad sent me some articles he'd published, and I sent him some documents regarding my work. He expected me to be, and here I quote him, the patron saint of wokeness, but he was pleasantly surprised to find that I was more complex. Following the date, I asked him to recommend one book to help me understand him better, and he picked The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. In it, Jonathan discusses the sociological roots of our society's tendency toward political tribalism. He emphasizes the importance of learning from one another's beliefs.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below, or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.